Hi everyone, Steven here. First announcement or note to make is I'm sorry for the delay between the last video and this video. I had a lot of exams and I was doing a job search that took up most of my time. But without further ado, we're going to go over some of the requests from the last video, and which are on screen right now, so you can just pause the video and read them off. Without further ado, let's get into it. So first things first, let's look at the problem statement right here. So we have a invoice for a music shop, and the aim of this project is to rename all of these files to the actual order number. So this file should be named ZXTW or 2323257. And the way we're going to be doing this is we're going to be looking for the text order number : and then whatever comes after this, which is this, we're going to rename it to that. So that's the goal of this video. So for Greg Horton, we would name it to this, and so on and so forth. Now, one thing to take note of here is we have two files that are very similar. There's Larry with 3 R's, and there's Larry with 2 R's. So just make note of that. The order number for both of these, although their file names are different, are exactly the same. So this is going to be showcasing our new error handling this time around. Without further delay, let's actually go through the code and see what's changed since the last video. So we're now importing the regex library, so that's the first change. And then we're creating a failed PDFs data structure, which is going to store every failed PDF to be renamed. And then we're going to keep a counter of all the failed PDFs, and then we have a regex statement right here. Don't worry, I'll go over this in a bit, and as usual, the links and everything I'll be using will be available on the GitHub along with the code. Next, we're going to create an empty string called text, and this is going to store the text of one individual PDF in that current instance. So in the case of Bob Smith, it's going to store all this text. But if you had a file that's, say, 20 pages, and another one that's 15, another that's 10, each of them is going to store all the text of all those pages. So 10, 14, and 10, and I hope I got that right. Next one is we're going to get the current working directory and store it in a variable. And the reason for doing this is because at first we're going to start from this file structure here. And at the end of it, I want to switch back to this after we go into this one and iterate through the whole thing right here. So I'll get a bit into that later. Directory name is PDF files, which is the file folder. And then we're going to change into that directory. So much like the last video, and then we're going to grab every PDF that, or every file that has the .pdf extension. So again, this is just some simple regex, so it doesn't care what the name is. It's just if it has .pdf, we're going to grab it. And for PDF and PDF list, so it's going to iterate over each individual PDF here. And then over each iteration, we're going to open a PDF. So this with statement basically says that at the start of the block, we're going to open the PDF, and at the end of block right here on line 21, we're going to close the PDF. And this is just so that we're not doing conflicting operations in the operating system. So just kind of a peace of mind type thing. Now within this with statement, we're going to iterate through each page of the PDF. So in our case, we only have one page, but again, if you had multiple pages, this will get the text from all those pages. And again, this statement right here on line 20 just says text equals text plus the page, the current page text of that. So page 1 will be, or page 2 will be appended to the page 1 text, and then so on and so forth all the way up to n number of pages you have. Next, we're going to be setting the new file name, and this is a bit different now because we're going to be calling the regex library re.search, and we're going to be searching the regex text right here. Or the regex statement, sorry, and then we're going to be searching it along the text of the actual document, so right here. So that's going to be all the pages combined in one variable, and we're going to search using our regex statement. And this right here just is going to say group the match you find and return it in text format, and then we're going to strip any white spaces on it. So like white space, again, is just if you hit the space bar or the enter bar and you didn't enter anything, it's just blank. So that's what that is. And then we're going to append the .pdf extension on it. And at the end of this, we're going to reset the text variable, just because after we're done iterating through one PDF, say like this one, we want to reset it for when we go through Greg Horton. So we don't want any of Bob Smith's details in Greg Horton's regex thing. And something different now is this is the error handling. So what this says is it's a try-catch block, usually described in Java or a similar programming language. And what it's going to do is it's going to try renaming something, and it's going to catch an exception of a Windows error. So what that means is if we go to PDF files and we create a new text file, and let's say we were going to create this PDF which already exists. So if we go File, Save As, and then we're going to do all files, just make it less noisy. If I tried to enter .pdf and I click Save, Windows will give me a visual error exception that says you cannot have two files of the same name that reside in the same directory. So we're going to be basically catching that error and similar ones. So instead of it doing a hard exit, and let me just exit out of that, instead of doing a hard exit like the old program, we're actually going to be catching the exception and doing something. So we're going to increase our counter by 1 and basically append to our data structure we described above here on line 6. And we're going to append a line that just says what count it failed at and what the old name is and what the new name was. So that's all we're doing. And then we're going to finally change back into our original directory. So up until this point in the code, we'll be in this directory. But once we're done with all the PDFs, we just want to change back to the main directory to print our error log if there are any errors present. So if length of failed PDFs is greater than 0, so if this consists of more than 0 entries, so it has at least 1, then we're going to open or create a text file that is called PDF failures, and we're going to write to it. So that's what that W stands for. And then we're going to open it as an object F, and then for failure in failed PDFs, we're going to do f.writelines failure plus a new line. So each failure will have a separate line of its own in the log, so you can visually go through it. And now the reason for doing this is because there are so many errors to handle, it would take a lot of code to or not a lot of code, but a decent amount more to go over every error. And I'm assuming that you won't encounter a lot of errors that frequently because you'll be renaming on things that are hopefully unique to your PDF. Okay, so with that in mind, let's actually go over and explain some of this regex because it might be a little confusing. So again, any link I open here will be linked in the GitHub or the YouTube video itself. So remember to check for that. And before we continue, I just need to change this back to what it was before. There, okay. So this website, regex 101, is a little handy website where you can enter a regular expression and then compare it against a test string. So what I've done here is I've copied over Bob Smith's order in here, and I've selected Python and match on here. So we're working in the Python language. And right away, you can see it matches the expression ZXTW323257, which is what we want to rename it to. And the regular expression we're using is called a positive look back expression. Now, this might be a little confusing, so you can look online actually to find a regular expression cheat sheet, and you can look up what each of them do, but it doesn't really go into much detail on this cheat sheet, so I actually went online and came across this helpful Stack Overflow article where they actually explain what a look behind positive regex expression is. So find an expression A where expression B precedes A. So what we're saying here is we're going to try finding a line where B exists, and then we're going to try and grab what comes after B, which is denoted by A. So to give that a bit more context, our regular expression where B is, we're specifying order, space, £, colon, and then a space, which is going to say we need to grab this thing and we need to find whatever comes after this. So one assumption I made in the problem statement is that each order number will have 4 alphabetical uppercase numbers followed by 1 or more digits. So that's what I've specified in this problem statement. And so the way to do that is you say, I want something, you do an open square and close square, and within it, uppercase A dash Z. And we want that 4 times. So we want 4 of these characters right here. So if I just remove this, you can see that our match now becomes ZXTW because that's what it's matching. Now, we actually want the digit, so one or more digits, and we would just write /d, and you can see this is the case here, because on our cheat sheet it says 1 digit is what that should return. So as we can see, ZXTW2 is what it returns, but we actually want the rest of this right here. So the way we would do that is we'd go back to our cheat sheet and look for the plus symbol which says 1 or more. Now, don't get it confused with 0 or more, because our requirements say we need 1 or more number. So we wouldn't be doing 0 or more, we would be doing 1 or more, which is denoted by a plus. And as you can see here, you can do 0 or more with a question mark, and what we've done for the alphabetical part, which is specify a number which is 4, so like that. And you can even do between 2 and 5. And so if the requirement was the numbers had to be between a certain length, then you could do that, but not in our case. So the plus sign specifies 1 or more, so then it picks up the rest of the digits. Now, you could rewrite this several ways to make a bit more sense, and one of the ways you could do it is from 0 to 9, and we want that 1 or more times. So that would do the exact same thing as before. Now, you might say, well, I don't have this requirement for an order number. I just want whatever is after this right here, or sorry, the order number section right here. And the way to do that would be just to delete all this and put period plus. Now, notice something very crucial here. It picked up the white space, but we won't have a problem with that in our code because we're stripping the white space. So if you really have no requirement on your order number, this expression will work best because it's just grabbing everything after it, except you're trying to see if it has 1 or more. So you're just making sure there's actual data there. Now, if I wanted to do 0 or more, I could do that, which does the exact same thing on the surface, but if I actually didn't have this here, it would pick up null because of the space. So you want to include the plus sign to do 1 or more. And if we go back to our cheat sheet, we can see the period. It's a little hard to see here. Any character except new line characters. So you just can't have a new line for that. So yeah, I hope that made sense. If not, leave a comment down below and I can do a separate video on trying to explain that a little more clearly, but that's what we're going to go for here in our example. So with that in mind, we're now going to go back to our code. And one other thing to notice, and I forgot to mention at the start, is I have a file Larry with 3 R's and Larry with 2 R's. And the reason I did this is to kind of showcase what our error handling is going to look like. So in the case of Larry with 3 R's, it has this order number, and Larry with 2 R's has the exact same one. So we should expect some sort of conflict here because we're trying to rename based off this. And if they have the same one, you can't have 2 files with the same name. So we're going to get an error. So just something to keep in mind. So looking on the left here and running the code, we can see everything except Larry with 2 R's changed. And the reason for this is because as it was iterating through the list of files, it first came upon Larry with 3 R's and said, oh, this is the order number, and it changed it, and Windows didn't have a problem with that. No exception came up. Then we encountered Larry with 2 R's, and we saw the same order number, and it tried to rename, and it said, no, I can't do that because there's already a file name with that name here. So I'm going to throw you an error and write it out here. And what that looks like in our error file is 1, failed to rename Larry Gary with 2 R's to the respective order number. So that's how you would do it if you were going off an order number. And the last step in this tutorial is rename files based off a list of names. If the name that is in the list is in the PDF, then rename it to that name. So that's actually quite simple. It's actually one of the more simple things to do in Python. And I'll just start by copying over some code. So we're going to first create a list of names, and we're going to include Bob, Greg, Larry, and Tracy in this list. And so we're going to try searching through each PDF for that name. So just a couple alterations here, and paste this in, and let's just space it out a bit so it's not as confusing. So what this says is after we've iterated through the the pages and we've got all our text in this variable, we're going to say for name and nameless. So it's going to iterate over Bob, Greg, Larry, Tracy. And if that name is in the text, then we're going to rename or make the new file name the name plus .pdf. So in the case of this one, we would see Greg matches to our list right here, and that it would rename it to Greg. But the only exception we have is the Larry files, because there are two names with Larry. Although we spelled the file names differently, the text within them is still the same. So wherever the other Larry one is, and I could actually figure that out pretty quickly if I looked here. Right, so they're the same name, so we would expect an error with this also. So we're going to save what we just wrote, and then we're going to rerun it. So looking on the left here, we should see all these change to actual names. And as you can see, everyone changed to Bob because Bob was here, Greg was here, and so on and so forth. But the only exception was Larry right here because this PDF also had a name Larry. And if we go back to our PDF failures.txt, we can see this change reflected. So Larry Gary order.pdf was failed to rename to Larry.pdf because of that problem. All right, so I hope this tutorial explained some of the requests. If you're still unsure about the regex, please leave a comment below, and I'll try to dedicate a new lesson towards it. But otherwise, thank you for listening, and bye.